What's up, photography world? Joshua Grosso here from theshutterschool.com, and today we have a session lesson. Alright, what's a session lesson? Well, this is the first in hopefully a long series of videos where after a shoot I kind of go through and reflect on that shoot and see if I can show some before and after, some behind the scenes, and come up with some tips for you on how to take better portraits from my experience at these engagement sessions. One thing I'd like to point out for you guys is whenever you do a shoot, whether it's an engagement session or a wedding or a landscape shoot even, is to kind of, when you go through your shoot, is to look critically and see what did you do that you liked, that you want to keep doing, and what did you want to do better next time. And so every shoot I always have things that I like and things that I'm disappointed in, and if I keep working on those things I'm disappointed in, I'll hopefully become a better photographer. So I'll kind of, as I go through, kind of point out what I think I'd like to do better next time. So the first tip is actually a posing tip here, and the bride specifically, or the girl from the shoot, said that she was real sensitive about her nose. She thought her nose was big or whatever, and hates pictures of her because of her nose. So one thing about that particular situation is if you have somebody, and these are all fully finished editing, she got like these flyaway hairs and stuff, so don't worry about that. But anyway, you'll notice that if the person is turned to the side, your nose is going to look bigger. Especially the main thing is if it breaks through that cheek, then it looks a lot bigger. So if you can keep the bride or the female, the subject, whatever, turned in such a way that there's face around the nose, it helps to de-emphasize rather than emphasize. Soon as it breaks that plane of that cheek, so here's about the limit of what I can get away with, because there's, it's right to the edge. As soon as it breaks through, it looks a lot bigger. So you'll see if it's fully sideways here, this is kind of a cute frame, cute moment with them, but as you can see by her nose coming past her cheek by a significant amount, that it exaggerates the look of her nose. So I learned that the hard way from having a bride that was really sensitive about that, and I did a cool silhouette shot, and really it was just glaring at you by having that sideways silhouette. So, and then the groom, he's got like a smaller nose here, so obviously he wouldn't be as sensitive about it. It's not a feature that he'd be worried about. So with portraits, you definitely got to keep in mind features that couples like and you want to emphasize or don't like, etc. Whatever. But she said that she didn't like it. So as you can see here, from being from the side to head on, if you shoot stuff head on, it always looks smaller than if it's from the side. So that helps be more flattering to her. Hopefully this is a photo that she'll like better. Hopefully she likes all of them, but pointing out that she didn't like her nose, that would be something to keep in mind. Alright, so the next one, most of the things that we shot, okay, so some background for this. They like this particular garden, they like hanging out in the garden, she loves flowers, so she picked botanical gardens in Charlotte, North Carolina here, the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. They have beautiful botanical gardens, and she really wanted flowers. But part of the problem was there wasn't a lot of flowers blooming, and when you think of shooting in gardens or like pictures with flowers, you want lots of flowers in the background, like a big beautiful tree full of flowers, field of sunflowers, field of daisies, something like that, right? And if all you have is little tiny bundles of flowers, it's hard to really show those off in the photos. So anyway, client had lots of requests of specific things. She wanted flowers, so what can I do here? As you can see, one small little bundle of flowers. This is a close-up shot of what we're working with. I saw the bee flying around, so I took a quick picture. But anyway, small little flowers, nothing huge here to work with. And then as you can see, the setup a little bit, semi behind the scenes shot here. This is the flowers in the foreground, and this is a 35mm lens, so they're not really enhanced here, so I'll kind of get into that. But anyway, so the setup, they're on the pathway, which the sunlight was actually lighting them up, and then once you get into this tree behind them, then it's a lot darker. So one thing to always be looking for is having contrast, so getting the people brighter than the background will help them stand out. If it's bright on bright, then it kind of blends together. So I picked a dark green tree with green shadows behind them so that they would stand out. The sun is hitting them. This is just a behind the scenes shot, that's why they're too bright. But anyway, you can see the bundle of flowers. Not a huge foreground element. And if I want more compression, I want to exaggerate the foreground, the flowers, I turned over to the 85mm lens, and this allowed the flowers to be a little bit bigger. It's still not as big as I would like, the really tiny flowers. Maybe I could squeeze the bush together and got more flowers. Maybe I can Photoshop one of these purple blobs in over here or something. But as you can see, it has a little bit of an effect of color and flowers. Not perfect, but it's better than, when there's not much to work with. trying to exaggerate what you have by using that compression and getting super close. These flowers are right up next to my lens. I think it would actually been better if I took the hood off my 85. It was sunny, so I kept the hood on. But if I took the hood off, I could have grabbed like one of the flowers and put it right on the lens. It would have really added like a big blob of purple over here instead of a lot of little pockets of purple. But it's relatively nice. They're still a little too bright. I got to finish editing. All right, so the next setup was this pond. So let's kind of show, let's see the scenery that we're working with here. Alright, so they're like, oh, this pond is beautiful. This is exactly what I want. And that's what she said as we walked up to it. Got to get shots of the pond. One thing about ponds, this is kind of like a beginner photographer trick, is that you think ponds are the perfect background, right? Oh my god, ponds are pretty. And actually, walking up to this pond and being in the garden, you're like, this is a beautiful pond. Ponds are tricky. Ponds make tricky scenery because, one, they're on the ground, and if you have plants all around them and things, it actually adds kind of a cluttered look versus a clean, simple look. So it's one of those things where you would think it's an amazing background, but because in real life it looks pretty, but it doesn't always photograph well. So you gotta really think about how you're going to photograph a lake or a pond or whatnot. And so the idea is, how can you clean it up and simplify somewhat cluttered? Because there's rocks, there's water. Water's kind of busy looking unless you slow the shutter and smooth it out. Lots of different colors and textures, so it's not as pretty to the eye as in the photograph as it would be in real life. So what I did was, I thought, well, okay, ponds are on the ground. That's what's pretty, is the water and the lily pads. So if you shoot down, then the pond becomes the background. So shooting down towards the ground. So I climbed up on the rocks. They were at the edge of the pond, and here's kind of the angle. The problem with this photo, again, her nose, and again, they're both looking down, so their faces aren't that much in it. This is a shot of their foreheads. So what I had to do is work the pose to where they were looking up a little bit and looking. I had the bride looking over at her groom here. I keep saying bride and groom, their fiancés right now, I guess, right? It's an engagement session. But anyway, so having the girl look at the guy, she's looking back. I've got him leaning a little bit away from me so that you get is facing the camera. Okay, so that's much better. Still, there's a problem with this composition here. As I'm shooting down and I'm trying to get the lake swirling around them, you see this bright hot spot in the middle of the pond, and that's from the sun. Now, that's not necessarily bad, but what happens when it's off-centered from them or away from them is this is what's drawing your eye in, this bright spot of light versus the couple. So the couple is bright, the pond is dark. That's good, you got some contrast, but there's also a bright spot next to them. So the eye wants to go here, 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 here. It doesn't work. So what I did is had them move in front of this hot spot, which is actually what I was anticipating in the beginning. And then, so now it's like this bright spot around them, and it helps draw the focus into them. So you have this darkness around the edges of this dark green, dark yellowish, brown, whatever the water is. You have them snuggled up. You have them leaning away from the camera just a little bit, so I'm still getting their face instead of the top of their head. And then the bright spot is circled around them. So actually it all comes together relatively nicely. So instead of having this busy pond scene, you're cleaning it up, you're focusing on what's pretty about the scene, and you're getting the lighting working in your favor with that hot spot. Alright, next I had them across the lake. The pond, I keep saying lake, pond, whatever. And again, I'm trying to do something creative. So actually reflecting on the shoot, the one thing I was disappointed in, I didn't really get a lot of creative stuff. I just did a lot of simple, solid, happy, romantic type things, which is what they were looking for, so it was great. But I tried to get one or two like creative eye candy type pieces. But here was my main attempt at doing that. Was reflections are always a great way to do it. It's actually hard to do anything really super artsy in gardens. It's just plants and simple. So I struggle with garden scenes because there's not a lot of architectural structure to work with. You know, it's just green space everywhere. And some people might thrive in that, but that's a weakness for me. I go to a garden and I'm like, what do I use? So hopefully I did a decent job anyway, going through the different compositions. But anyway, so I saw this reflection in the water. Yeah, so there's a little, hold on. So here's what it looked like. There's lily pads in the foreground. I noticed the reflections here. To get a reflection, it needs to be bright light on them, and then the water needs to be darker than the couple so that it'll shine. And so I used my 85. I had the lily pads in the foreground, try to focus on their face, and it was blurry because now if it's still water, you can actually get a pretty good reflection. But because there were some waves, because there's a waterfall, the ripples, you can see it kind of stretched and blurred them out. So I had to take like 20 in a row, click, 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 to try to get one. Here one, it's a little bit sharp on her eyes, and then this part of her face gets a little blurry. But I made sure that their feet were in focus, so it's kind of abstract in a way. It's like their feet being playful with her leaning in, and then you see the reflection as the abstract part. I don't think it works perfect. I think it's still a little busy. I think compositionally they're way too close to the edge. I needed to maybe get a little more breathing room here. So it's not a perfect execution, but the strategy here of just kind of thinking outside the box and looking for reflections, trying to simplify a busy scene of a pond is kind of the tip to go with here. Alright, let's see. Alright, so going back to this is kind of a standard shot I try to do is I try to find a clean spot to have them looking at each other, walking together, laughing, smiling, get them goofing around. And this shot worked out okay. But again, going back to the posing tip, I noticed you always got to be looking at their features to make sure everything's flattering. So this angle, let's see, not really edited. But anyway, so this angle here is relatively flattering. That's probably a good frame. I probably could edit. But anyway, as they're walking towards me, I'm realizing I'm getting too far to the right and it's emphasizing her nose, so I quickly move to the left, so I'm shooting at her face. So to de-emphasize things that are big, you kind of want to shoot them, head on instead of at an angle to stretch them out. So that's kind of something that came up again from earlier. I used the flower trick down here again. This didn't work out as well as I wanted just because of the layering of the ground. Like, if perfect spot, it would have been easier to shoot if they were over here and I was on the same level as them. But this is actually on the top of a hill, and I had to shoot from down here and shooting up through the flowers to get to them. And if they were to come over here, they would have been down too and have been hiding. So the angle is a little bit more shooting up than I like, but it kind of works. I've got the blue sky behind them, luckily, put them in a hot spot. Here the pose isn't perfect, they're a little stiff. He looks good, she's a little like in between smiles and emotions. Here I'm trying to get her looking into the light because the light was a tiny bit harsh, so by having her look up into the sun, it's a little bit more flattering. It could be a little bit better. But yeah, so shooting up through those flowers at 85mm lens, it adds that beautiful flowery effect. Cool. Next scene is this Japanese maple tree. It was a little bit reddish. He liked the red Japanese maples. They didn't have them. They kind of had this greenish red, so I'll cheat a little bit. But anyway, as you can see, he wants to use this maple tree, and it's hard to make something so small be a background. I totally could have had them in it. So the other trick to do is if you have a small element that you want to use, you can use it as a foreground instead, because you can get really close to it and take up a lot of the frame. And so what I did is I got really close to the tree and used them walking down the path as the shot. So I actually took a couple. In this angle, I like for the walking shot, what I did is I noticed that the sun was hitting the path, and so they're brighter. So the fact that they're brighter, they stand out against this darker. The underside of the tree is shaded, so it's a little bit darker, and so they're gonna pop. And that's what I like. And then this particular angle worked because they're surrounded by the leaves. And then instead of just having them walking and being plain, I like to always try to add some action to it. I had them kiss around the forehead, just add another, something different to look at. And I probably need to touch this up a little. But like I said, it was more of a green tree, and I really like the red maple look. So what I did is just took a brush and brushed in the white balance. I shifted it magenta, so it kind of made it a little bit more reddish. It's cheating a little bit here, but it kind of was the look that he liked. He liked the red maples, so I kind of played around. It looked okay with the green, but fudging with the editing can kind of help you fill in some gaps when you're missing what you're going for in the shoot. All right, and then the next location we chose was this Japanese arch in the Japanese gardens. This is what it looks like. Very nice structure. So in a garden, you don't have a lot of structure, so when you have it, you definitely want to use it. The first wide shot here, actually I did this wide shot after the first shot, but anyway, so when you have a forest gardening scene, it is a little bit busy in a way, so if you can find any structure to it to help frame the couple, it can go a long way. So by getting a wide shot of them in the garden space and then them inside the arch, it kind of helps the eye get focused on them a little bit more than if it was just a busy forest scene. Anyway, getting back into the more close-up, it works better with the symmetry. I have them underneath the arch, or step out from the arch so that they get some light on them. If they're underneath, they'd be in the shade a little bit, and you don't want that. You want them to pop on the dark background. Luckily, the sun is coming from behind me through the clouds, so the light is hitting them, but then the forest behind them is a little bit darker, so they stand out. So that's one thing that's good. Got them interacting, talking, being sweet, and whatever. This looks good. It's a nice balance between the symmetry. They're in like this third triangle here, then the arch. But then also what I like to do when I do a wide shot of the scenery is I like to get them closer to the camera so that it's still the same. I zoomed in a little bit here too, but the arch is still kind of part of the background, but they get closer to the camera, so they're a stronger part of the frame. I don't always like all these scenic shots with a couple small. You want some, so it's like wide, medium, tight, kind of, you get the variety there. So it's 3 different angles from the exact same scene. Especially when it's a more intimate pose, super snuggly, then you want to get closer with the camera. And so the way to get closer to the couple but still get that background element is to get them farther away from the background, if that makes sense. So I got to get closer to them. If I were to keep them underneath the arch and then get closer to them, you wouldn't see the arch. So it looks like the exact same scene, but by moving them forward and backwards in the frame, you're going to get a different effect between them and the background. So that's another tip to look out for. Alright, the last setup, this is just kind of in between shot here of them laughing together, but just to show you, there's this path in the background. It's just, you know, the gardens behind them. It's a little bit busy between the ground, the gravel, the trees, some bright spots of sun, some dark spots. You know, it's going to be okay when I go through and find something out of this that'll work, but I just wanted to show you what the scenery was as much as I could and the tweak I made. So it goes from all this busyness to shooting up at the trees, and you get this effect. Now the reason you get this effect specifically in this setup is it's the sun is shining through the tree leaves, so the tree is actually backlit by the sun, and what's happening is you have little dark pockets of leaves from the underside, and then you have like sunlight coming through, and you have reflection of the leaves. So what ends up happening is you get this bokeh effect. So if I were to zoom in on the couple and there was like lights behind them, you would get this cool bokeh effect, but it kind of simulates that by having the sun come through all these little holes in the tree leaves. And so if you zoom in really close, this is the 35mm. At 1.8 you still get a decent amount of bokeh, but by zooming in with 85 you can see the bokeh is 3 times bigger, and you get this effect. So this was my attempt at trying to get some creative eye candy out of just the garden, something different. It's got this wall of bokeh light. Maybe if I play with the editing a little bit I can get some more color in there, but that's kind of where we're at right now. All I did was went through my basic preset and toning of everything. I haven't like done anything too artsy with it. And then zooming in real close just to get something different, and then getting them playing together. This is the 35 again, trying to get laughy, happy photos. But that's the third scene, third trick. So I guess the main tricks here is look for hot spots, shoot down at objects, shoot through objects to emphasize them, shoot down at objects to clean them up, look for reflections. If you have small pieces to work with, you know, maybe if you get close to them they can become big pieces. And bokeh-licious leaves. Alright, those are I guess the big tips from today. Now my reflection, like I said, one of the things that you should do is look through your shoot and say, what do I like that I do that can be kind of one of my things. I just started doing this tree thing, so I mean that's something I could use more often. I've done this shooting through flowers thing forever. I could just always get better at it. I guess that's become one of my go-to things. The shooting down into ponds is a new thing. I haven't done that before. So those are things that you can kind of keep as your go-to bag of tricks when you're at a shoot. What do I want to improve? Refine when I do shooting through stuff, making sure that the pose is still tight. Just because I have a cool foreground and I'm distracted trying to get everything to line up, you might forget to pose them. So next time I want to make sure I get the pose just a little bit more precise. Try to get some more creative stuff as well. I didn't get anything too over the top artsy here. Everything's just solid and clean. So definitely I got to make sure I have some lighting or something at my disposal to try to get 1 or 2 like eye candy pieces. Is what I'm going to try to do next time. Even if broad daylight, it's harder to use lighting on broad daylight. Plus it was at gardens where you're not supposed to have tripods and stuff. So I just left the lights at home. It's kind of an excuse. So finding a way to, during the daytime, still do something dramatic with the lighting. There's no drama to any of the lighting here, and so I guess that's one thing to keep in mind for my next shoot. But anyway, so that's episode 1 of Session Lessons. Hopefully in future shoots I'll have some more good behind the scenes and good examples to show you of some things that you can learn from. Thanks for checking me out. You can go to shutterschool.com for more tips. Subscribe to us on YouTube so you can keep getting videos. Like, share, help us out, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much.